Alright, so this is the second episode, or the extension, on the cell unit. So this is really going to finish out the rest of 2.1 for our class. So it picks up with 2.1.5 or 1.6 and continues on through the end. So I guess let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the surface area to volume ratio, which is really, we talked about, and we watched a couple of videos in class about this, about cell size, but really we're having a quick discussion about why are cells so small. And we do talk about some variety in that, but generally cells are pretty small, and there are a couple of reasons for that. So let's go ahead and talk about those reasons. So first off, let's start with this term that we have just mentioned in class, but we've spent a lot of time actually talking about it, because that's all the last unit was about. Metabolism, which you've heard and used the word before, but you may not know what the technical definition is. But essentially metabolism are all of the chemical reactions inside a cell, or all your cells. So it's how quickly you're processing reactants into products. And what's important here is that this is proportional to cell size, specifically the volume, if we measure cell size by volume. So with so there's a direct relationship between how much volume cell has and how quickly it's metabolizing. But of course, I'll put a little start here. Of course, cell size is not the only factor that leads to high metabolism. Because we all have cells that are small, yet we all have different metabolism rates. But essentially, what this volume allows for is that with more volume, more reactions occur. Which is kind of interesting to think about, but we have to remember that reactants have to get into the cell, and products, sometimes, some products, have to get out. And they need spaces to do that, so surface area matters too. So it's really about the surface area to volume ratio. The surface area to volume ratio. It's very, very important. So let me just add a little note here. So if the ratio is too small, and think about what that means. A small ratio means a low surface area and high volume. Low surface area to high volume makes a small surface area to volume ratio. Then the substances or the reactants will not enter because there's not enough surface area for them to do so, so they're not going to enter quickly, and the waste products will accumulate because they can't get out quickly. If the ratio is high, which means low volume, high surface area, so the high ratio means lots and lots of surface area, but not enough volume, then not many reactions can occur. Sorry, not many reactions can occur because there's less space for them to do so on the inside. So there's a little bit of compromise. But in addition, I was just in a different color here. But in addition to thinking about how fast reactors and products can get in and out, heat production and heat loss should be considered. So, jealous I'm not going to write it, but the metabolic rates are the things that are creating or giving off heat from the chemical bonds that they're processing in the reaction. So as they give off heat, remember that's the lost energy that's not going to go up to the next trophic level. It's a connection back to ecology. But that heat is being lost by the cell, and if there's not a lot of surface area, there's not a lot of places on the cell where the heat can be lost, which leads to the overheating of the cell, which then may impact the enzymatic reactions within the cell, which then would affect the metabolic rate and which may cause the cell to die. Okay, so I hope you get that. There are a lot of connections there to previous content. I expect you to know that, but if you think about cell surface area, increased surface area is probably better. So remember that in our mitochondria, our inner mitochondrial membrane has a lot of surface area and not too much volume. Alternatively, we looked at the chloroplast, and we had our thylakoids that are stacked up, or pancakes that were stacked up into granum, or if we got more than one, grana. But each one of these thylakoids has a membrane. With more thylakoid membrane, we can have more light-dependent reactions, which increase the metabolic rate. So the more membrane, less area, usually means the faster the reactions can occur, or more reactions can occur. Alright, so enough said. If you have questions, jot those down. Let's move on to stem cells. Alright, so before we talk about stem cells, let's talk about unicellular versus multicellular organisms. I think you know what unicellular organisms are, but sometimes they can be colonial, like the Volvox genus. Look them up. Look for a picture of them. They're pretty cool. You might have seen them under a microscope in Bio 1, maybe not. Multicellular organisms are defined as a single mass of cells fused together. And what's really interesting is that these cells, I'll do this in a different color, these cells are specialized for specific jobs or functions. And it's the development of cells in different ways to perform different functions that we call specialization. If you think about this, another context that might help, if you know any doctors, they specialize or they have specialties because they look at different things, they're specific. So, just as a connection to a previous unit, even though all DNA is copied in DNA replication, which is really for preparation for cell division. Only some sections of the DNA are read, and it really depends on which cell is doing the reading. So it reads different sections, but that means that there are different functions. Their functions differ based on the proteins that were transcribed and translated from different genes or sections of DNA. Alright, so I hope I didn't lose you on that. But when a certain gene is read and used in a cell, we use this word. So write down what I just said, but we use this word, that the gene is expressed. Alright? So stem cells are quite interesting because by definition they are cells that have the capacity to self-renew by cell division and to differentiate or become different kinds of cells. So if we think about it in the context of us, we start as one cell. When the sperm and egg came together, we start as one cell and then it divides. And these early cells, once after a few divisions, these early cells have the potential to become any kind of cell, to help the organism function. So they're pluripotent. They have the ability to become any kind of cell that the body needs. But once they decide they cannot go back to the stem cell. So once they've started to move towards one direction, they cannot go back. But what's interesting is that when you typically think of stem cells, you're thinking of embryonic stem cells, but a small percentage remain as stem cells in adults. A couple of diseases that are related to this are Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and strokes. Jot those down. These are caused by loss of nerve cells. So when we think about the potential of stem cells and the ability to regenerate new nerve cells to fix those symptoms is quite an interesting opportunity. So very quickly, let's talk about the last target, which is the therapeutic use of stem cells. So you probably heard of this, bone marrow transplants. Well, bone marrow has the opportunity to differentiate into red blood cells, which carry oxygen and carbon dioxide around, or white blood cells, which help in our immune defense. So there's several diseases that bone marrow transplants are used for, like leukemia, severe combined immune deficiency, multiple myeloma, and lymphoma. And really the way that it's used in lymphoma is first someone's bone marrow is removed, that person receives chemotherapy, and then the bone marrow is replaced to regenerate red blood cells and white blood cells that are cancer-free. I know you probably have lots of questions. Jot them down and we'll talk about them.